Welcome to the Division of Information Technologies, Technically Speaking TV. I'm your host, Adam Mikeal. Today we are joined by Kevin Gamache, the Chief Research Security Officer for the Texas A&M University System, Cam Beasley, the Chief Information Security Officer for the University of Texas at Austin, and Michael Sardaryzadeh, the Chief Information Security Officer for Texas A&M University. Thank you all for being here. According to IBM, the education sector is in the top 10 for most targeted industries for cyber attacks, accounting for a significant percentage of all data breaches in 2018. Michael, why do you think universities are such a major target for cyber attacks?
Well, having been in the financial industry and healthcare and government and different industries, every industry has something they want to protect. For example, obviously in banking or the finance industry, you want to protect financial information of your customers. Healthcare, the major thing to protect, obviously, is your patient's healthcare information, and so on and so forth. In higher ed universities, large ones like UT or Texas A&M, that are also large research institutes, you have all of those things. It's not one major thing you're trying to protect. It's you have healthcare information, you have financial information, you have student information. So you have a plethora of data and information that fall under all sorts of regulations, federal regulations, state regulations. And so from an attack perspective, this is almost like a one-stop shop. You can get in here, and what adds to the ease for hackers or the difficulty for securing these type of environments is there needs to be a certain amount of freedom in order to do research and do the business of the university, where in a corporate environment, for example, you can implement very stringent controls very rapidly and throughout the entire system. You have the security organizations in those industries or companies, corporations have more control. University system is a much more diverse environment, and that's what makes it a little more attractive for the attackers.
Right. Cam, how do universities stay a step ahead of those attackers?
So I think for one, being disruptive for the attacker is really important. Changing the landscape for the campus as much as possible, as quickly as possible, is a great defense. On our campus, we see roughly 18 million attacks a day, and when the bad guys are looking across your campus to find various targets, if you're updating your systems, if you're changing that landscape on a regular basis, it makes it harder for the bad guys to find a beachhead to initiate and to pivot laterally from there. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is just being really diligent around using automation as much as possible. So automating your response to different attacks or to different countermeasures. So if you need to actually respond to a breach system, that you automate that you can actually just do that in the wee hours of the night without having a human lay eyes on it. Those are really important processes, because if you can automate that, once you detect the threat, you prevent that threat from festering and getting worse and then spreading across your campus. So that's huge, I think.
So the importance for automation is that speed of the response to the attack?
Yeah, and what you see a lot of times, there's something called breakout time from nation-state attackers, for example. So Russia has a breakout time of roughly 19 minutes. China has a breakout time of roughly 2 to 4 hours. So if you can automate that time to your response such that you are beating their breakout times, you can cut down a lot of that fallout that might occur from a compromise.
Right. Kevin, from your perspective, what poses the biggest cybersecurity risk to universities?
The biggest risk to universities is the very structure of the American system of higher education. What makes us so great, that sense of openness, that sense of collaboration, the willingness to share, is also the very same thing that makes us vulnerable. when you look at the U.S.-based system of higher education, it's built on that system of openness and strong collaboration. It's built on a willingness for faculty members or researchers to get together and push the edges of science to add to the body of knowledge. It's a system built on being innovative, and when it comes to defensive measures, those same kinds of things that make us great often make it very difficult to implement defensive measures in the cyber arena.
Thanks, Kevin. Stay with us. Technically Speaking TV will be back in a moment.
Every October, the Division of IT recognizes National Cybersecurity Awareness Month with the release of a new online game. Each game quizzes players on everything from malware and phishing to online safety. Over the years, the campaign has won a number of awards, including the Best of Texas. In 2019, the campaign was featured in a special guide from the Chronicle of Higher Education. Previous games can be found at u.tamu.edu/games. The 2019 game, the Aggie Cybersecurity Circus, can be played at it.tamu.edu/cybercircus.
Welcome back to Technically Speaking TV. We live in a world where it seems that almost everything is connected to the internet, from thermostats and refrigerators to cars and even fish tanks. Known as the Internet of Things, do these pose a security or privacy risk, Cam?
Most definitely. So to the most paranoid folks like me, I think for sure, these devices bring a lot of great convenience to our day-to-day activities, but we have become more reliant on the companies that manufacture these devices to A, ensure that they're actually building the devices securely so they don't pose a risk, and B, that they're not putting other hardware or other capabilities into these devices that they don't disclose to us. So we bring these devices into our most sacred spaces a lot of times, and we trust that those vendors are keeping us safe. Typically, we've not had to really rely on that type of that level of trust for other third parties, but as we bring in these meshes of networks into our homes and into our cars and into our most personal spaces, we really have to be mindful of what we are exposing ourselves to. Also, these companies a lot of times don't necessarily just want to freely deliver service to us. We are the commodity in a lot of those cases. So they want to mine us, mine data about us. They want to understand what we do with their technology and how we use maybe their competing partners' technologies. So we have to be mindful of that we are not just consuming a service. We are the service in some cases.
So when you're referring to these devices that we bring into private spaces in our homes, you mean things like Alexa or Siri?
Or even the Nest recently in the last year or so there was a disclosure that they had a microphone that had not been disclosed previously. So there are legitimate devices that we were bringing into our homes that might be listening to us in ways that we didn't think about, or might be capturing things about us that we did not anticipate.
Michael, let's talk a little bit about these Internet of Things or IoT devices. When we have faculty, staff, and students on campus connecting these types of devices to the Texas A&M network, what type of risks does this pose?
Well, first I'd like to kind of reiterate what Cam said. It is not only the devices in our homes, but also the devices that companies purchase from manufacturers. These devices do send data back to the manufacturers, a lot of data in some cases, whether it's for servicing, whether it's for data mining. So that is absolutely true. I believe in 5-6 years from now, there's an estimate that we'll have about 75 billion different IoT devices in some form or fashion attached to different networks. The problem with these IoT devices currently is that they're always on, most of the time, and they are hard, or in some cases impossible, to patch and secure. I've worked in product security for a manufacturing company, and to go back to answering your question, I can tell you that the number one most effective thing in securing IoT or different types of devices is putting pressure on manufacturers to bake in security into these devices. Because at the end of the day, manufacturers produce devices to make a profit. And if there's a realization, as has been happening for the last few years amongst manufacturers, that universities, corporations, organizations, different government entities just simply won't purchase these devices unless they can be assured and verify that these devices are coded securely, are designed securely, so on and so forth. That goes a long way in securing these devices, whether for home use or whether for company use, for business use. Now, something that we can do internally is purposeful networking, meaning network segmentation, right? So from a business perspective, again, today it's very hard to secure individual devices, but we can segment off series of devices into certain network segments and monitor those segments. Also, something that relates back to the university, whether it's UT or whether it's Texas A&M or any other university, is from an IoT perspective or device perspective, security and central information technology should be in the line of purchasing these devices. Because again, if these devices at some point hit a central gateway that has security involved, we can put that pressure on the manufacturers. We can review or assess these devices to see whether they're secure or not, and also in the installation of them, where they get installed and what network segments they get installed. So really a combination of those things currently will help improve the security of IoT.
So taking this a little closer to home, what are some things that an individual could do to protect our data and our technology?
I think a lot of times when we're teaching students in the class that I have, we ask them to really consider how the technology that they use today in a given day affects them personally. A lot of times students don't even consider how their privacy is, in some cases, being trampled on by some of these products. They just want to use the tools that are availing themselves to them. So I think just being more vigilant and creating more of a rational distrust of things, or questioning of things. How does this work? How are they using my data? That's what I want to build into my kids and into the students that are on our campus. You know, question things. Don't just accept them as they are, because they're not always as you might expect. And then along the lines of networking, just making sure that you can actually do that segmentation locally at home. Maybe that you're not exposing those devices to a wide open network at your home. On campus, you know, we will create different striations of systems to say, you know, the elevators are in this network, the sprinkler systems are in this network. You know, and keeping that walled off is really, really important, because a lot of these devices cannot be secured. Or the vendors might not necessarily even be around in the next 5 years, where some of these devices are engineered for 10 and 15-year deployments. So keeping that in mind. The attack surface changes quite a bit too. Anticipate a new set of attacks. So if you've got your clocks in all of your classrooms networked as IoT devices, anticipate an attack on your clocks from students who want to get out of class early, because that could happen.
It's the modern version of pulling the fire alarm when you don't want to take a test.
Right.
Michael, would you say that these are reasons why it's important for us to encourage students to enter the cybersecurity field? Absolutely,
absolutely. I truly believe IT in general, but specifically the cybersecurity field, is obviously it is growing at a pretty fast pace. I think it's going to grow even faster. Going back to the IoT or medical device, all sorts of devices, home use devices, these are exploding. I mean, just think about it. How long have we talked about cars, self-driving cars, and so on and so forth? well, soon this is going to become more and more of a reality. And imagine the amount of effort, automation, people, thought processes that have to go into securing those things, because really people's lives are at danger at that point if certain cars get hacked. And there's already been evidence of cars being hacked many times. So that also, from a medical perspective, as wearables become insertables, as medical devices and IoTs become more and more, as we move into the future, part of human function or medical analysis, well, these devices, again, going back to defibrillators being hacked and pacemakers and child heart monitors and so on and so forth, it becomes a more important arena and field that we need more people. Currently, we do have a shortage in cybersecurity and good cybersecurity talent, and I think the problem is that cybersecurity is kind of like the surgery part of the medical field, meaning in order to be a good cybersecurity professional, you would have had to go through the programming and networking and so on and so forth. So you do have to understand holistically how technology works, how it's interconnected, and how it relates to the industry or the corporation, company, or business you're in order to ultimately be able to conduct cybersecurity effectively as a cybersecurity professional. So it's not something you can jump in and in 6 months all of a sudden become a true cybersecurity professional. It does require years and years of experience and paying attention and analysis, and that's why there's a shortage, and that's why I think it's going to explode even more as far as the need for cybersecurity professionals. And so I encourage anyone who has an interest in technology to consider the cybersecurity field.
Thanks, Michael. Stay tuned. Technically Speaking TV will be back in a moment. Welcome back to Technically Speaking TV. Kevin, we've heard this term insider threat used in relation to cybersecurity. Can you tell us what that is, and if you see that as a significant threat to universities and to research institutions?
Sure. The United States Computer Emergency Readiness Team defines insider threat as the potential for an individual who has or had authorized access to an organization's assets to use their access either maliciously or unintentionally to act in a way that could negatively affect the organization. So insider threat is a considerable problem for universities and research institutes, and often in ways that private industry doesn't have to consider. First, universities welcome students and visiting scholars and faculty from all over the world to collaborate and to push the boundaries of science and knowledge. This collaboration does not always come with an extensive vetting that you would be able to do in private industry. The whole idea behind academic collaboration is to share information and push the boundaries of science. The willingness itself to share that information, coupled with relatively easy access to our networks, can pose a significant risk if universities aren't aware and actively managing that problem.
Well, can you talk a little about some of the national cybersecurity efforts that Texas A&M is participating in?
Sure. In 2018, the Texas A&M University System was instrumental in starting the Academic Security and Counter-Exploitation Program. This is a national level organization that is focused on awareness and training of not only cybersecurity, but the larger risk to our research security efforts across the country. We have more than 250 individuals involved today from over 100 universities.
Wow.
And this is something that we are working with on a daily basis to make our university's research base more secure.
So to wrap things up here, I'd like to sort of zoom out to a high-level question. Cam, of all the cybersecurity threats that you're aware of, that you track, what scares you the most?
Humans.
Humans.
Humans are our weakest link in a lot of cases. We work a lot to secure systems and infrastructure, but really our people are our weakest link. Making sure that they're vigilant is hard. Making sure that they understand technology is hard. Making sure they don't click that link is really hard. But also, making sure that the folks that are developing systems that we consume, services that we consume, understand technology. So all too often we will review, and I'm sure you guys run into this too, we'll review different third-party applications or products where they have significant vulnerabilities or exposures in those products. These are well-established companies in a lot of cases, serving many, many broad audiences, but they just didn't understand that fundamental thing about how the downstream tech stack worked or some other component of what they were relying on upstream worked. So it created an exposure. So I think we've moved away in a lot of cases from this notion of having a digital native to application natives. We don't have, and we talked about this in terms of folks understanding technology, we don't have as many people, I think, that have a well-rounded understanding of technology today, and it creates lots of gaps. So humans are my biggest concern.
Humans. All right, Kevin, what threat concerns you the most?
The insider threat by far. When you look at the U.S. system of higher education, it is the best in the world because of our sense of openness, our willingness to collaborate, and the extreme innovation that we have in the United States. But when it comes to the insider threat, that same thing that makes us great is the very same thing that makes us vulnerable.
Right.
So our challenge is to protect what is best about our system of higher education without damaging it at the same time.
Okay, so Michael, same question, last question. Which cybersecurity threat concerns you the most?
Well, as far as cybersecurity threats go, in the corporate world or at work, ransomware is the one that I'm concerned with the most. I think that's currently the more prevalent type of attack that really requires, it's hard to catch up with and stop once it's inside of your network, and also it's the most visible and so on and so forth. But from a more holistic perspective, the security issues with the Internet of Things is of the most concern. Again, we are becoming more and more across the globe, not just in more industrialized countries, but across the globe as more countries become industrialized, like the United States. And we are becoming a web of interconnected devices. And so a rash of attacks based on vulnerabilities that exist currently or could exist in the future with future IoT devices is what really concerns me going beyond the workplace.
I know that the most significant or most expensive cyber attack in 2018, which was called WannaCry, significantly impacted the national health system in the UK. That was a form of ransomware, right? That you mentioned earlier.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Unfortunately, I had to deal with that exact type of attack in another industry, in another company, and it truly is a very hard thing to get ahead of and stop once it's hit your network, or once it's inside your network, and it started proliferating. So that is top of mind for me. And
for an individual, a layperson, if they find themselves the victim of this type of ransomware, is there a way for them to protect themselves? What do they do? How do they respond?
Well, once you've discovered you have ransomware has hit you because you get a prompt asking for money, really the thing that you need to do is contact the security organization in your company or at your university as fast as possible. Time really is of the essence in these type of attacks, so as soon as you see that, you have to immediately contact security, the help desk, security, however your organization is structured.
I understand that the state of Texas recently experienced a certain number of ransomware attacks within cities and county governments. Is there a way to respond to these other than simply rolling back to backup? Is that the primary response that you've seen?
In some cases, it's the backup is the only option. In other cases, the infrastructure might not have been significantly impacted, and you can just blow the infrastructure away and restart from scratch, from bare metal, as it were. Some organizations or municipalities don't have the luxury of having sophisticated IT operations or staff who are ready to serve them. So when they get hit by these instances, they can be very disruptive to them, and they don't really have a backup to fall back on. So I think what we find is a lot of those communities just kind of they don't necessarily entertain the idea of paying the ransom, but they just disconnect, rebuild, and keep going. We've even seen some places go back to paper operations as they're recovering. So having a good backup plan that does not require a computer is actually a really good thing. In the traditional academic sense, if you had to use chalkboards, maybe that's okay. So if you have other mechanisms to provide your services, maybe that's a good thing to have as a backup plan.
Right. Well, gentlemen, thank you all very much for joining us. Cybersecurity is a concern that is only going to continue to grow as technology advances. To keep you safe online, the Division of Information Technology creates a new cybersecurity awareness game each year. If you'd like to test your skills, we invite you to try our award-winning games at u.tamu.edu/games. Thanks again for watching. We hope that you will join us on the next episode of Technically Speaking TV.